All right, good afternoon. I am Jason Thompson. I want to welcome you to our session. I am the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Western Governors University. We have an esteemed panel, and the topic today is how do we humanize the pipeline? Often when we talk about diversity, we talk about this term, pipeline, and getting more individuals into the pipeline. And when we refer to it as a pipeline, does it therefore dehumanize those people? And do we begin thinking about them as things rather than people? And does this concept actually reinforce the barriers that exist, or does it in fact enhance it? And that's the topic for today. I would suggest on the day of your interview, the most important thing you do is choose what to wear, because you know it's going to best suit you for that pipeline. And that's a difficult decision to make. And so part of the challenge we have, I think, as individuals is who's in our network, and do those individuals help us negotiate the network? So the way I wanted to start today is to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, talk about what you do, and then share somebody from your network who's helped you negotiate the pipeline. So I want to say this too. If you like this idea, I'd like to take full credit. If you don't like this idea, I'd like to introduce you to Michael. He goes first. Michael, do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Michael Morris. I'm the head of the GEAR program, and GEAR is building a social capital-powered pathway to technology careers for women and people of color for whom opportunity is currently out of reach. I've been at WGU for 3.5 years, and we're launching the GEAR program. And an influential person, I guess I'll also say two influential people. One is actually a set, and it's a set of 7 siblings whom my wife and I adopted about 3.5 years ago out of foster care. And knowing them and understanding the world through their eyes has deeply influenced how I pursue my career and how I try to make an impact in the world. And through them and through fostering, I've connected with lots of other individuals who have provided needed insight into how we can really help people connect with opportunity. But another is Kim Clark, who was the dean of the Harvard Business School. I did my undergrad at Harvard and got to know him through my faith community. And so when my wife and I found out we were selected to adopt 7 kids and I was working at a pre-revenue tech startup, I turned to him and said, hey, I need a different job. Do you have any people that perhaps I should meet? And he connected me with another individual who connected me with my now boss. And I like to think, I actually was telling someone today, I feel a little guilty whenever I talk about networking and kind of connections and the roles that connections have played in my career advancement, as if I've done something wrong, as if I haven't earned or somehow had the skills for the roles that I've been in. But I'm working to overcome that sense of shame, because this is how the world works, right? We have relationships because we are human beings, and human beings need relationships. And those relationships are in part there so that we can help each other advance our careers. So that's a little bit about how social capital and relationships have enhanced my career.
Wow. 7 kids, wow. I didn't know that about you. I didn't know they were adopted. Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. Okay, Sarah, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Burns. I'm the Director of Learning at the San Diego Workforce Partnership. So on behalf of San Diego, I welcome you all to our fine city. And the Workforce Partnership is the Workforce Development Board for the City and County of San Diego. So we are federally funded primarily, but have all kinds of different revenue sources and programs that support job seekers and students in their journey. So that goes from operating career centers across our county, which is approximately the size of Connecticut, or to developing very specific skills-based programs in fields like tech, for example, or construction, to help people get a foothold into the world of work. So someone who has really helped me in my network, in my journey, was really first an organization, Teach for America. I started my career in education. And when I moved across the city from New York to San Diego and knew nobody over here, that's who I reached out to and said, hey, can you connect me with our office over here? And that's how I got my first job, through the executive director at Teach for America San Diego, who connected me with that job, and someone at that job then sent me to my next one, and someone at that job sent me to my next one. So my whole career in San Diego has been based exclusively on network. But I think the piece that makes it a little bit, that helps with that shame part of like, oh man, like I keep just getting passed along to things, is part of social capital is giving you exposure to people, right? And it's not that you don't have the skills or you don't have the capability, it's that sometimes people can't see it. And when you have those connections and that social capital to get you that exposure, that's when you're able to continue to achieve and advance, I think. So that's me.
Thanks, Sarah. Katie?
Cool. Yeah, hi. My name is Katie Franco. I'm the Executive Director for Girl Develop It. We're a nonprofit organization that serves nationally women and non-binary adults teaching software development skills as well as career skills. We've been around for about 11 years. We used to be much more chapter-based and geographic-based. We're now virtual. That was one of the gifts of the pandemic. But it's been interesting for us. It's allowed us to really open up our access and be able to open classes for folks all over the country at incredibly low prices and make sure that we have we call ourselves sort of the welcome mat of tech education. Sort of come take one class and see if you like it. Social capital is a big story of my career. I could talk about so many different things, but the group I want to talk about, I don't know if anyone's a Brene Brown fan, but she's got, one of her things in her book is called Square Squad, which is a group of people around you that you can be completely honest and they'll be honest with you. So I've got a group of 4 of us women we call each other our Square Squad, and our text chain's titled that. And it's sort of the people who proof my resumes, and we do presentations and even look at the emails before they go out, all that kind of stuff. But it's been amazing for just, I think the thing that we help each other with is not so much of contacts, but also that confidence, that continual, like you can do this, that hype, they call you your hype woman in your corner. So that's sort of my social capital these days.
All right, thanks. Just as a kind of a word of note, if we'd like to have this be as interactive as possible, so if you do have a question or a comment, there is a microphone, so we ask that you use that. But I will start with a question. I think I didn't share somebody who was influential in my life, and my first job out of college, the person who hired me, her name was Dolores Cordona, Dr. Dolores Cordona, and I sent an email that had to go to introduce myself to the entire organization, and I'm dyslexic, and I didn't know it at the time, and it was written horribly. It was embarrassingly bad. So she pulled me aside and said, your writing's terrible, essentially, but I will edit every single email before it goes out, and I will edit all your work. And it made me, and it saved my life. Essentially, my whole career is based on the fact that she afforded me this much time. So it makes me think about the question I have for each of you. When you think about a lot of individuals who have no social capital or who don't have that background, it takes a lot of time. Essentially, most companies have this pipeline because they need efficiency. Can those two things live in the same space? And if so, how? Who would like to go first?
I would like to go first. So in many places, and in San Diego, as an example, about 95% of our businesses have below 25 employees, right? It's primarily a small business world. So when I think about that pipeline, it's much more rare that it is one organization that is thinking about that, and more that it's a community. And so I think there's the benefit when you're looking, or just the difference between those different types of businesses and sizes, that when you have that smaller business, obviously there's more space for that humanized piece. And I think that can be scaled. I think in order to really build those connections and have a workforce that is going to be loyal and that is going to persist and do good work, that the larger businesses need to take some of those lessons when they can.
And I would say that no one has no social capital. Everyone has some social capital. What they may not know is what that social capital can be used for, how they can capture those relationships and understand who to go to for what, and how they can build new relationships. So it does take time on the other side. Ultimately, social capital is most powerful when you have an authentic reciprocal relationship. But everyone has something. They just may not be aware of it. And in many people's cases, they don't know that it's okay to say, could you help me with this? Could you connect me to someone who works at X organization? Could you look at my resume? Could you read this email for me, right? People need permission to ask for help. But I think that everyone has some social capital. Everyone is starting somewhere. It's just a matter of learning. And that's where the efficiency can come in. If we can develop efficient ways of teaching people how to assess and activate their networks, then I think we can help even employers who may be reluctant to invest that time to expand their social capital as they're helping talent to expand their social capital.
We're going to come back to that. Katie, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think pipeline's a really interesting question. I mean, I've been in this job for almost a year and a half, and I think every week I've had a company reach out and ask me if I could help them with their pipeline. I get emails or phone calls, and literally that's the question. We need to build our pipeline. Can you help us? Do you have people? Can you send me resumes? And we sort of kind of say no to that. You know, we are not going to just hand you over somebody. Our average, someone who takes our classes is usually around between the age 28 to 35. So a little bit non-traditional learner, somebody who maybe has been self-directed, learned on their own, and they just don't fit into that pipeline mix. So we can give you the volume that people are calling me for, but that's a huge question I've had, and I've challenged a couple of recruiters of like, are you looking for to hire someone, or are you looking to hit some numbers? Like, do you need to say that you have 20 women in your pipeline, or are you looking to hire somebody? Like, where are you at, and how can we help you? So it's a really interesting question for me on that pipeline, and I do agree with you, Michael. I think everyone does have some social capital. But we've had some calls, some really interesting classes where people will be on there, and we'll ask HR folks to come on and just open up, like almost an AMA, ask me anything with it. And the people are like, wait, I have to have a LinkedIn? We're like, yeah, we're looking you up on LinkedIn. We're taking your resume, and like, I didn't do that. So then we do a LinkedIn course. You know, like people are just, I think, still are kind of this old school mentality. A lot of our folks who are looking, especially our demographic with the age group, that they're looking for, I sent my resume, why didn't I get a call back? And I think that's that piece of helping people understand the social and opening up the access to ask those questions and get that information.
And Sarah, I want to follow up with you a little bit on what Katie just shared. And this is this idea of, for many companies, they want to be more diverse. They think that's important. What have you learned, good or bad, about companies who have this commitment to a diverse pipeline?
What I'll say is, I think a lot of diversifying your workforce, however you interpret what that means, is based on exposure again, and getting access to people who might fall outside of your typical pipeline. So examples of that for us are, we have programs like a tech hire program, where there are individuals who have training in technologically focused occupations, and they're from underrepresented backgrounds within the tech field, and they're having trouble getting a foothold. And we all know people are more likely to hire people like them, right? Affinity bias is a real thing in hiring. And so we offer subsidized internships so that employers can take what they perceive as a risk, because there isn't a typical signaler there, right? The person might not have a bachelor's degree, so they might not have anything that they believe or trust as a signal to this person's quality or competence. And we can remove some of that risk by subsidizing an internship, with the goal toward having that company take that person on full time after the internship is over. So several of our programs work in that way. And so companies are excited to participate in that kind of a process, because it removes some of what they perceive as risk. Now, sometimes, of course, businesses at the end of that will try and say, okay, great, can I have another one for 6 months? You know, we ran out our tab on that one. And those are the companies that we choose not to work with, of course, in the future. And we try to prevent that in the first place, because the purpose is not to give you a stream of never-ending free interns, right? It's to expose you to someone who then you can hire and have on as a full-time worker. So that's some of the disappointment that comes at times, but of course we try and screen for that and work with it.
Michael, you talked about this concept of social capital and that everyone has it, and it seems built into GEAR. Can you talk about why it's built into the GEAR program, and how do you teach it?
We're in the process of building it into GEAR, to be completely transparent. And the reason why we're focusing on it is because we know that skills are important. And we see a world where employers are getting better at articulating the skills that they need, and education providers like GEAR are getting better at training people on the skills that employers are saying that they need. But there's still that gap. At the end of the day, we could end up with a lot of highly skilled people who struggle to connect with opportunity, because people and relationships are usually how we connect with opportunity. And so we're building that into the program. We do that through a cohort model. So WGU is competency-based, and it's people work kind of at their own pace, and it achieves great effects. But it doesn't bring people together into an experience where they're expected to learn from each other in a cohort that's moving together through a program. So in GEAR, we've made the decision that people will come in and they'll have these live sessions with working IT professionals where they can learn from the working professional, they can learn from each other, and build those authentic reciprocal relationships in that process. And then we're working with employers to help them not think about pipelines, right? But to think about people that they can get to know and develop relationships with through work-based learning experiences like apprenticeships or internships. And we do hope that as we build these relationships and foreground kind of the importance of relationships with the talent, with the individuals, with the employers, that the employers will start to get it. And I think the goal would be that when a hiring manager at a company needs to fill a technology role, that they can go to their network, right? They can post it on LinkedIn, they can, make a few calls to trusted colleagues and know that the candidates that will come back through their network represent the diverse world that we live in. And so that, I think, is not just that we're creating a lot of people from diverse backgrounds who have the skills, but that we're also creating the mechanism that people are using now, because people are going to go to their network to hire, right? It's impossible for people to not go to their network to hire. But if they have been intentional about developing their network and making it more diverse, then we can achieve the goal of having a diverse workforce. Now, the other thing, of course, is making sure that the workforce and that the workplaces are then inclusive, which is, another step. And then making sure that people feel that they belong in those inclusive environments. So there's still a lot of work to do, but those are some of the things we're doing in GEAR.
Thank you, Michael. We'll open up to questions here in a minute. So I want to prompt anybody who has a question. But Kate, I want to come back to you, Katie. You had kind of alluded to this, but for some of the participants in your program, what are some of the challenges they see, and what are some of the questions they typically ask you about kind of starting to get a career in IT?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we find, and I think the statistic is women in general wait till they hit 99% of the qualifications on a job description, compared to male counterparts that tend, I had to go an HTML course, I'm a web designer, kind of thing. And no offense, but I think we're really talk a lot about confidence, and we do as much as we can to try to, we make sure that the instructors that we hire to teach our courses have great stories about non-traditional pathways. So, the person who's teaching this amazing, we're doing a Python cohort right now, and she pops to my mind, and she's a self-taught woman who now teaches at a university. So we want to make sure that our folks are seeing the stories, that you don't have to just have this bachelor's degree in CS to get a job in tech. And then I think, from that, we're also really trying to, again, a little bit hard virtually to kind of similar to what you're working with GEAR, of how do you get people to start to connect and build relationships virtually. So this fall we're going to do a couple of coaching cohorts where we're really focused on leadership coaching and bring in a couple of coaches with a tech background to sort of try to really help folks. You're ready, let's go for that job interview. How'd it go? Come back, and let's really help coaching people through that whole process. But I think the number one barrier that we have, and we've trained over 5,000 people this year, and this is not based on this next number, but I would say more than half of them think they're not ready to work. And they are. Some of them are I've been through 3 boot camps, and now I took this course just for fun. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're ready, let's go. So it's really that confidence of how do we get people to say, you're ready, let's go, and let's get you confidently into that interview process, and then have a process that is supportive of them.
Excellent. I have actually a follow-up. Is there another question? There's a couple questions.
This is actually a follow-up question for Michael. You mentioned that everybody has that social capital, and probably not everybody is aware of that. How do you create that awareness of, probably drawing your social capital via visualizing it, or how to strategize that strategy?
Yeah, so our plan is really just to help people think through their relationships and kind of take an inventory as they come into it. And this is an area that hasn't been our focus yet. It's sort of a little further down on our product roadmap, but we know that it's a huge need, kind of a diagnostic that can help people walk through the relationships that they have and start to think of them differently and think of different gaps. Because you could think, oh, okay, well, I might need to cover healthcare, and I might need to cover childcare and parenting, and maybe there's personal finances. There's all different kinds of, what to wear to an interview, different kinds of help and advice that people might need in relationships. And so we think as we can help people to think through that kind of categorically and systematically, then we can help them to see where they have relationships and then see where they need to build new relationships.
And this is just a quick question maybe for all of you is, I grew up very working class, and it feels wrong to ask people for help or to ask them for an opportunity. How do you help people overcome that?
It's a really good question. I mean, I'll take it real quickly, but I mean, I think that is like when we have these HR sessions and we say, ask me anything, I mean, our members are like, wait, what? I can ask you anything? You're not going to judge me? You're not going to hold it against me in an interview? I can just ask HR any question I have? They're huge. And I think we just have to create these opportunities to break down that kind of ivory tower approach of like, how do I get myself a job? But it's such a good question. It's a big challenge.
I think sometimes part of it is helping a person to see how they're also helping the person they're asking from, right? Number one, because people like to feel helpful. So you're giving that person an opportunity to give and to support you. And that's something that most people appreciate. And the other is something a colleague said to me once that's really stuck with me, which is it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And by sharing yourself with more people and letting them know what you're interested in, what you want to pursue, what skills you have, what you're bringing to the world, you're expanding your exposure and their network, right? They now know somebody else so that when their network calls and says, hey, do you know someone who could help with X, Y, or Z thing? They have another person in their pocket as well. So helping to reframe that a little bit can be successful.
I think there's a vulnerability that we can have with people that can help to engender trust so that when we tell them and share our own personal stories and examples, they can maybe see themselves in us and identify and say, oh, okay, maybe that could be me one day, I could ask. And it's all right. I think the other thing is we kind of have to expose things that often go unseen and unremarked upon, which is largely the fact that relationships matter and that people get jobs through connections, and that no one's success really is only because of their hard work, right? Hard work is important, but there is usually a wide network of people who are responsible for the success of any one individual. And the more we can make that visible and kind of share credit, our own credit for our own successes, but help them to see, that Steve Jobs isn't just Steve Jobs, but he is a part of a network of relationships that allowed him to, to innovate the way that he did.
Excellent. I think there was another question.
Sure. Yeah. So certainly COVID has radically changed the game as far as networking goes. And we're all now living to some extent in this hybrid, if not fully remote world. And would love to hear how you guys are, we've sort of heard some stories, but to hear more about how you all are helping folks sort of bring like tangible connections into their networks when, Western Governors, for example, has such a large online presence, and there's no guarantee that the tangible connections are going to be in their same town. So how do you sort of deal with this in the online age?
One thing we've had a lot of success with in our programs are online platforms that allow to do sort of virtual networking events. So Remo's the one that we've used, where you sort of get a little map and there's little tables and you can pick who you want to go sit and talk to. And that has been successful in starting to get our program participants into that space of talking to someone new, of connecting, even if it's not as natural per se as being in a room. But we've also found that it's even more effective for some than being in the room. There's a different kind of comfort that you have with like clicking on a table and showing your face showing up. Someone can't ignore you, you're in the room. Then walking around to a bunch of belly tables and trying to sidle up to somebody and start a conversation. It actually has made, I think, networking a little bit more accessible for some people. So that world of trying to take what was once in person all the time online.
In Gear, we're taking a specific geographic approach. So we are working with local partners like workforce boards and YWCAs to help people build relationships within their communities. But I do think the barrier to access for new relationships is much lower. I mean, you look at how easy it is for us now to have just business meetings, to approach new business relationships just via Zoom, right? In ways where we might have tried to go back and forth and schedule a time to meet in the office or to meet somewhere else, and now it's pretty easy, I feel, to approach anyone and say, hey, could we do a Zoom? And so I think that does, the barriers are lower. Now, there are issues, I think. There's opportunities because we're now connecting with people in some ways quite often in our homes, and that can bring an opportunity for us to get to know each other on a more authentic level, but it also creates opportunity for kind of prejudice and bias to creep in and affect people. And so one thing that we think about at Gear is how do we teach people to be aware of how they're showing up, but not teaching them to kind of compromise their authenticity or individuality or cultural identity as they're thinking about how they're showing up.
Yeah, just real quick to follow up. I mean, such good points. This was a huge shift for us as an organization. Like when I started in February, it was like, we don't do virtual. We don't do virtual classes. And we're like all in on virtual by March. But what's been really interesting, we've tried a lot of experimentation. So we've done events where we've had corporate volunteers, had like 20 volunteers. We match them up in 3-to-1 groups to work on interview skills or something like that. We've done speed networking. We've done whole bunch of things. And I think we're doing good on the kind of like that mentor-mentee relationship of building. I think where we're going to really focus this year is how do we have the person-to-person, like that real social capital, like my network, not just people that I want to get to know because of a job, but how am I just building. What we used to have in person is that through our organization, people would build these lifelong friendships, just because they sat next to somebody and learned how to code together. We've got to figure out how to do that virtually. I think that's the next level of how do we really, that you follow up and you take the next step and you get to have that haha laughing thing over, while you're at a hackathon. We've kind of lost that space, so that's the next kind of frontier that really open for ideas. We're trying to learn.
Yeah, I would just add, as a natural-born introvert, I kind of like virtual because it's easier to call, and then you're forced to talk to me, whereas I just can't make up conversation, and it feels like it's more natural for some words. And then I'm comfortable because I'm in my own home, so it kind of makes it a little bit easier. I think we have another question over here.
Hi, it's sort of two questions. As a woman in technology, I've been in many an interview where I'll ask, how many women are in your organization? How many software developers do you have? How many product managers do you have? And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the answer, well, you'd be the first. So I'm curious what kind of training you guys are offering to those people who are going to be a minority in the fields that they're going into to help them cope with that, because so frequently those minorities will then leave because they don't feel supported. And then I'm also curious if there's anything you guys are doing to help organizations do a little bit better and not get to that point where they're going to be able to say those types of things like, oh, I'm sorry, you're going to be the first, because you're not going to be able to hire that person very easily. You're asking someone to be a pioneer, not just take on a job. So curious if you guys have any advice there or what kind of training you guys are offering.
I can take the first part. So just, that's very common. We hear that a lot in tech, and we've had some amazing roundtable conversations about women sharing their stories of, well, you're welcome. Now you can be the ERG leader, and now you could take on the women in leadership, and now you'll be all these things. And by the way, but we're not going to pay you the same as your colleagues, but whatever. Just a little plug. But so, I mean, I think peer groups and peer support, and we've had a lot of those kind of leadership conversations from women who are CTOs and have kind of plugged away, and then helping some of those women get in front of our members is hiring, sort of let's go where they go. We don't so much right now work with the company aspect. You guys might talk more about that, but it's so hard.
Where Gear is in its kind of organizational development is a fairly new project. We're looking for employers who are a little farther along in their diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, so that when we bring them diverse people, they are more prepared to support them. And we will work with them to kind of assess that, but they really kind of need to be beyond the first woman in technology in their organization. So that's where we are now. You know, perhaps in the future we'll be better equipped to train people, but it's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask of an individual to go into that environment. I think, you know, many of us may have had that experience, and it's enough to do your job and then to be asked to do all of these other things and the emotional labor that is never compensated. So for now, our approach is to look for the employers who are ready.
And I would say for us, we're sort of on the first step of that. And step one for us is helping employers to be first aware of that and aware of their company makeup. So we've been talking with a company called Working Metrics, who is creating a tool for companies to be able to analyze and report on the diversity of their workforce. And so we're trying to develop that tool to be as comprehensive as we hope it can be. And then offering that to employers, maybe someday requiring that of any employers who want to work with us, and helping them to reflect on the data that's in front of them. I think step two would be then that training and helping them to digest and think about what they can do to support the individuals coming into the organization and do that work more effectively. So that step one is just awareness for us.
Yeah, and it, having done diversity for way too long, I think one of the things I try to work with companies is the expectations should be fair. You know, if someone is the first woman, great, that's going to happen, and somebody has to be the first. But the expectation should not be, now you have to teach the entire organization. Now you're responsible for every single woman on the planet. Now you have to teach everybody everything. Like, it's just like, that's just too much, and it's not for everybody. I came here because I want to be an engineer. I want to be an engineer like everyone else. So that should be, you know, the first thing we have to level set and set the right expectations. And for some, they may want to do that, but it should be something I want to do. That's usually the biggest challenge is companies, because they're working so hard to try to get diversity, when somebody finally shows up, it's like now they expect this person to do everything. It's just unrealistic. Are there other questions for the panel? One of the things I would like to ask each of you, and I think all of you kind of work in this space, is one of the challenges is a lot of times the things that happen in the workplace are implicit. And it seems like our challenge is how do we therefore make those things explicit? Can you talk about some of the things you teach that are just implicit in the organization, but no one tells you that you should know? And one of my examples would be, I struggled today thinking, should I wear a sport coat? Right? Because I could tell people have this assumption, you're supposed to be the head of the room, do you wear the sport coat? But if someone doesn't tell you that, how are you supposed to know? And so I, you know, because of my current situation, I just made a conscious choice. I ain't doing it. But if I were early in my career, that's not a choice I would be able to make. But also I might make it not knowing, because if someone doesn't tell you. And I remember years ago I worked in a company where the CEO didn't like people with facial hair. And so everybody kind of figured it out, and then some people didn't. They didn't get promoted because they didn't realize like this is kind of the unwritten codes. And so I'd be curious to see some of the things that you teach or help people understand that typically are implicit that need to be made explicit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go, we start this actually in K-12. So we have a rubric that we use for workplace readiness that can be used with elementary, middle, high school, and job seekers where they are, to actually put on paper, here are things that you may need to know about your workplace. And here are the things that you should ask about if you don't know what the appropriate thing is. So having that rubric and then having them, it's just a single point, so they reflect on where do I already show expertise in this and where do I need to grow or improve? Or where do I need to gather more information if that's the case? So at least putting that on paper in front of them and letting them know it's something they need to ask. So, because often we don't know what we don't know, right? And I will just say I got feedback on a panel very early in my career as well, where I didn't wear a blazer and had a button-down shirt, and I was told I didn't look professional. And I could maybe do that if I were a professor who was a little bit, you know, like wacky or I don't know, had a personality and had a style, but that's tough, and definitely helping people to understand what expectations of the audience might be, even if it is not necessarily fair.
Well, where we've been working with some individuals who are brand new to online meetings, we've had to just explain very basic expectations, or what seemed to me to be basic expectations: to turn on your camera, to be in the frame when you are on camera, to try to avoid screaming at other people in the house while you're on camera. But if you have to scream at someone else, then please mute the meeting while you're screaming at someone else. Sometimes it happens, hey. But so I mean, and I think a lot of it is just building that relationship so that you can do that in a way where people don't feel offended, where they know that they're just learning something new and you're just helping them to understand the expectations, and you don't have them feel singled out. I mean, there's ways of doing it, but we do quite often have to just make some of these things explicit. And sometimes, like, the rules aren't even clear, especially in this sort of remote environment. And so part of it is just helping people to think through, asking the right questions, and maybe talking to other people about, hey, how should we do this? How do we want to do this?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, and sometimes the rules aren't clear and apply differently to different people.
Yes.
So like the feedback that I got on that panel was probably true, because if I'm a young woman on a panel with 3 older men in suits, and I'm not wearing a suit jacket, the world's perceiving me differently. So I have a different standard that I need to meet, and that's annoying and unfortunate, but it's true. So helping them understand that as well.
Yeah, I think for us, we don't teach that maybe the way we should. There's probably some opportunities for us. It's taking some good mental notes. But I think the thing that we've been focusing a lot on is we have some classes around finding your voice in the workplace, making sure, understanding imposter syndrome, and that it's okay to make a mistake. Like, your career wasn't over because you didn't wear that outfit. I mean, so where I think a lot of times a lot of our members internalize that differently than I think, oh, well, I was never good enough. I didn't go to college. That's why I'm being singled out. A lot of folks have these things built up, or we're trying to help folks just really, find a way to speak up, to ask the questions, to get the feedback, and have the confidence to make a mistake and keep going. And that's something that a lot of us take for granted, that, oh, I can make a mistake at work, it's not a big deal. But if your first time in an office setting, that in your last job you made a mistake and you got fired, I mean, that is a big deal for a lot of folks who don't understand that it's okay to make a mistake sometimes.
Excellent. Are there any other questions, comments? Oh, just one. I didn't mean to cut you off. We need to use the microphone.
I want to talk about support. I think support breeds safety, and safety breeds communication. And so, in your experience so far, which levels of support have you found working the best? Is it like monetary support? Is it more like, hey, we provide a center where we can communicate support? Or is it kind of all of the above? Like, what in your experience so far are you finding is working the best when it comes to that support safety pillar?
That's a good question.
I will say all of the above, depending on the individual. So, for example, we offer in some of our programs mentorship. So it's the one-on-one support from someone who's in an industry and can help you along. For others, we offer paid training. Or training, we have an income share agreement program where it's funded up front, and if you are successful in securing a career at a certain minimum wage, then you pay back a percentage of your income. So that support, that's financial essentially, that allows them to get into the program and to take that next step in the first place has been incredibly successful. So those are, and the other sort of physical support. So for example, we will do professional headshots for all program participants, because that's something that not everyone has. It's hard to get the light right if you're doing a selfie in your living room, so that they're able to then present themselves professionally to the world. So those are some examples.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it is personalized. I think of an example of a learner who had a housing issue. They didn't have housing, and they were concerned that we were going to kick them out of the program because they were getting behind because they didn't have a place to live. And I think it was the relationship with our program staff that allowed that person to express that to that member of the team, and that person could then go and talk to the workforce board that was part of the Department of Health and Human Services that had referred the individual, who could within their own organization then make the referral for housing. But it was interesting that the person that first learned about that housing need was not the workforce board, it was a member of our team because we had this kind of ongoing relationship related to their learning, which they saw as, crucial to their future. So I do think they needed that financial, that tangible support of housing, but they needed to have that safe relationship where they could express that need and get the help.
And just to add, they're both, such good answers. I think the thing that in our dream world at GDI, the thing that we talk about is if we had $1 million, we would give every single one of our members access to executive coaching. That level of mental health, career coaching, how's it go today? How was your day? Okay, you made a mistake, no big deal. It's totally inaccessible to most people who are starting in the workforce, and it's amazing what the impact is, why CEOs have executive coaches. There's a reason why, Olympic athletes have coaching. And I think that real kind of, mental health support, partner in crime kind of stuff that we would give our community, I think would make a huge difference.
I love this concept of safety. My son came to me, this is a couple years ago, it was his first internship out of college. And he said, Dad, I haven't slept for 2 or 3 days. And I said, why not? What's going on? He said, well, on Monday I have to write on the board. He's dyslexic. He said, I can't do that. And that's what they're expecting me to do during the meetings. I have to write everything out. And he didn't feel safe to tell somebody that he couldn't physically do what was asked of him. Because, he can read and write and all those things, but he just can't write in front of people. There's just no way. And, I think sometimes those things are missed because people have, disabilities are invisible. A lot of times people don't realize that, but also the importance of safety on a lot of different levels in the workplace. And so luckily, because, and I think we forget this too, is because I had professional experience, I was like, it won't be a problem, just text this, or just write, and help him draft that. But I think a lot of times, even just having that support network, which you kind of mentioned, that you have your group that you call that you can be honest with, is that people also need that at home as well to give them the support to go to work so they can have the strength they need in the workplace. So I want to close with this question, and it's kind of been alluded to, I think one of the challenges is confidence. What do you do and what place do you go to build that confidence? I think all of us have gone to work sometimes, we're like, man, I don't know why everybody thinks I know what I'm doing. And what things do you use, or what are the tools you use to help build your own confidence?
Well, it started with clothing, honestly. So today, I had this, what am I gonna wear? What am I gonna wear? And I decided I wanted to wear something that made me feel confident, but also a little bit subversive to say I'm not gonna wear a sport coat, I'm not gonna wear, anyway, but it was going to be me, and I didn't care about, what other people were going to be wearing, but knowing that I was going a little bit maybe against, the kind of business casual look just helped me to feel like I was being my authentic self. But, therapy, I would say, is the other thing. I believe everyone should have therapy. The question is just how frequently. But yeah, so somewhere between therapy and just owning it and finding ways to kind of manifest my authenticity on a regular basis and being okay with who I am. And asking, I just believe that anything is possible until I've proven that it's not possible. And there will be things that whatever. There is some exclusive event I wasn't invited to, I will ask to be invited. And the strange thing is that quite often we will be invited if we will ask. It takes that assertion, but that builds my confidence as well. But partially it's just, I just have to believe that I'm better than other people may think that I am.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm am I confident? I don't know. I think part of that is external validation, right? It's very helpful when other people tell you how well you're doing. I can always count on my dad to comment on whatever I put on LinkedIn, to say, you're great, you're the best in the world. So, it helps to have a cheerleader always at your corner like that. But of course, from supervisors, from colleagues, from people giving feedback. When I'm doing some training or something, I always do surveys, and part of that is so I can just feel okay about how it went, right? So certainly that piece, and also logic, right? If I have somebody who can point out help me realize what evidence do you have to the contrary, then I'm successful in believing I'm confident. But
That's good. I don't know. I mean, I have my squad. I have my girls that I text all the time, and they text me, and that's a daily reminder. And then I've got 2 girls of my own. They're 8 and 10. And it's funny, this is the first trip I've taken in a while, clearly, and have moved from the phase of don't leave me to go get it, Mom. Like, so that was super, like, so, it's hard to, stand back or not feel confident or not walk into a room confidently when you get 2 little girls at home expecting you to do all those things.
Thank you. And
you.
thanks everyone for joining us today. And help me thank the panel.
It was fun.